Okay, let's talk. Tipperary won their 28th All-Ireland, a winning margin of 14 points against Kilkenny yesterday. We've Shane McGrath and Jamesie O'Connor with us. Shane, congratulations. I presume a pretty sweet day watching that result?
Pretty sweet day, Joe. Yeah, any day you go up to All-Ireland final and you're scoring 325, even 317 of them from play against the old enemy, which is a very sweet day. And just to give the ultimate performance on the biggest day, I think it's kind of the sweetest thing of all. And it was just the ultimate team performance from everyone all around the field. And like, I'm a big man on the stats, I suppose, but one of the stats that blew me away was in the second half, 45 shots that the lads took, scored 2-3, which is phenomenal. Like, and that'll just tell you that, that'll just tell you how much Tip dominated the second half and just set up a platform to win, push on and win the game by 14 points. Like.
Shane, Nicky English made the point that this is a historic victory for Tipperary. It means that for the first time since the 1960s, there are now players in the county with 3 All-Ireland medals. There's Pádraig Maher, Brendan Maher, Noel McGrath and Seamus Callan. That puts into context, even for a county like Tipperary, what a big achievement this is.
Yeah, I would compare Paddy, Brendan, Noel, Shamey and Bonner, even though Bonner wasn't injured yesterday. One of the biggest roars yesterday, Joe, was when Bonner lifted that up. I compare these guys to the Man United class of 92, where you had Mickey Buss, Paul Scholes, the 2 Nevilles. These guys, a group came through together and they made such a difference on a team. And that's what them boys are for us now. They're our class of 92, even though they a lot of them, I don't think they were hardly born maybe in that back then, but they were minors in 06 and 07 winning All-Irelands. And I don't know, are we going to get a group like this again together, really, of 5 or 6 guys who we can really call Tipperary hurling legends now. They've 3 All-Irelands, All-Stars, Hurlers of the Year titles. I mean, they're a phenomenal group, and we're very, very lucky to have them at the moment. And maybe there's another year or 2, maybe, in these guys, and I really hope they do push on. But as we can see now, we're talking in 7-8 games trying to win All-Ireland. James, he'll tell you, back in, even in 10 years ago, 8 games, there's been an All-Ireland now deserved.
Jamesie, we'll come on to what they might do in the future, and the average age of this team is still only 27. I think a lot of people had it in their heads for a good chunk of the year that they were older, but still an average age of 27, and crucially Liam Sheedy is going to stay on. But if we just almost park this decade for a moment, 3 All-Irelands as opposed to 2 in 10 years just seems to put an extra sheen on things. It elevates this group. If it had just been 09 and 16, there would probably have been a sense that this group had underachieved. 3 in 10 years suddenly becomes, it elevates them to kind of greatness that maybe you couldn't quite say they were at before that.
Absolutely, Joe, because, TJ Reid and Richie Hogan had 7 medals coming into yesterday. I think Colin Fennelly, Walter Walsh maybe have 4. Paul Murphy maybe has 4. Wally maybe has 3. So for those guys, there's no question about it. I mean, if they'd ended their careers with 2 All-Ireland medals, they'd absolutely have underachieved given all the big games they've been in. But listen, they were the best team yesterday. They were probably the best team all year if you take the blip in the Munster final out of it. And I think, in fairness to Shane, what Pádraig Maher and Brendan Maher and Noel McGrath and Seamus Callan and Bonner have given the game in general. I think most neutrals would say, they're Tipperary, the old enemy for most of us. But we were happy for them, and they certainly did it in style. And Callan, to score 8 championship goals, Joe, in 8 matches, it's never been done before, and it's unlikely to be done again. So that was a phenomenal achievement for him, and he's been I think rejuvenated. I think, and I think the influence of Eamon O'Shea in terms of what kind of a guy and what kind of a person he wanted to become, and he's really borne down and elevated himself into the higher echelons, and he was tremendous yesterday, and I suppose setting up Bubbles for that 3rd goal just really put the seal on it, and it was just a matter of how much they were going to win by from there to the end.
You mentioned Eamon O'Shea, and Jamesie, there's this brilliant moment at full time where Sheedy grabs Tommy Dunn and Dara Egan. Egan still only 33, I think, but he was the kind of substitute goalkeeper in a former life for a long time on the bench in Tipperary, and he grabs them, and then Eamon O'Shea eventually joins up as well, and there's this big hug. And when you think about that group, the level of humility across it all, like, you've Tommy Dunn, and people wondered if his toes were being stepped on when Sheedy goes to Eamon O'Shea and asks him back. You've Eamon O'Shea, who managed this team to an All-Ireland final, willing to come back and almost, carry the water on the sideline as well and be second in command. And not many guys want to do that. Paul McGinley said he's never gone anywhere next to near Ryder Cup vice captaincy again because he's been in the main job. And then you've Sheedy, who's willing to go to someone like O'Shea, who he knows, will get credit as the brains of the operation in some respects when it comes to that hurling acumen. And I'm not saying Sheedy doesn't know his hurling, of course he does. But you might take my point. And then you've Tommy Dunn, who I presume had to say, okay, I'm going to have to relinquish some status here if O'Shea comes back, because it was only after the league. You swirl all that around, and that's a kind of cocktail of humility.
Absolutely, Joe. But that probably goes to the people that you're dealing with. I mean, Tommy Dunn. I hurled against Tommy for years with club and county. And listen, he's a quality guy. He's a genuine guy. And ultimately, what does Tommy Dunn want? He wants what's best for Tipperary hurling. I mean, Eamon is exactly the same. It looks like I'm on the record before what the influence he had on me, and just even his. Sometimes he just I suppose that listening ability, that he'd find the right words to say to you and just leave you feeling better about yourself. And again, all he wanted what was best of those Tipperary players. And I think Liam had a sense that, listen, the players probably, certain people are just good to have around the place anyway, Joe. And obviously, O'Shea was going to bring something to the party, as was Tommy. And listen, it was about assembling us as a team and a backroom team in general that could be as good as it could be, and you listen to Seamus Callanan going on for what felt like half an hour, naming all these people. But this was an unbelievable effort, and it just goes to show us what it takes now to win All Ireland, what's required behind the scenes in terms of your stats, in terms of the strength and conditioning, the masseurs, the medical people, and so on. And she put that team together and put a lot of thought, I suppose, into getting the right people in place. But listen, humility is something that's often spoken about in terms of the Dublin footballers. You look as well at the Kilkenny backroom team, and James McGarry and Derek Ling and Michael Dempsey, Cody, the former players, the Kilkenny players that that I've encountered. I mean, Tommy, JJ, Brian Hogan, these guys are good guys. They're humble. They've got what it takes to win, obviously. But yeah, I mean, credit to Sheedy for going after the people that he wanted. And I mean, O'Shea, I think, had said, listen, I'm in Galway, I'm busy, I'm it's a lot going on in my life. And yet I think he persisted, wouldn't take no for an answer. Yeah. And certainly, O'Shea's handprints are all over this. And I think the bigger thing is probably the philosophy in terms of, each county has their own style of play and Tip for a particular way of playing. And, look at as I said, we had savage battles at Tip in my time, and they were the arch rivals and the big enemies. But I think hurling people in general appreciate the way they try to play the game, and the skill and the vision and the panache and the desire just to get goals that we've seen these guys play with since 2009 and 2010. And it was it's been great to watch at times. And as I said, Callanan could easily have tapped that ball over the bar for the third goal yesterday, Joe. But it's the mindset. If it's on, it's on. They're going for it. And that's probably what separates Kilkenny over the years and that Tipperary team, is that ability to get those goals, those killer crucial goals in big matches. And that's probably why they're All-Ireland champions. And remember, look at it, in 2014 they were the puck of a width of a post away from arguably a 4 titles. So probably for those players, commensurate with the efforts and their talents in the last decade.
Shane, if we pick our way through the game, that first 18 to 20 minutes, Kilkenny are ahead by 5 points, I think, at their best moment. And they've had a few bad wides, really bad wides, and one or two kind of half looks at goal, Walter Welch a few times maybe. But they seem to be winning all the rucks, they seem to be winning all the 50-50s. They could be ahead by more. At that stage, the Tipperary fan in you must have been ever so slightly worried.
Well, I think what epitomised that first, as you said, 15, 20 minutes was there was a kind of nervousness with our lads, and they decided more so by Barry Effernan, who had the game's life Tipperary, in my opinion. He came out with the ball and he passed it to DJ Reid, the best player in the country nearly. And that was just nervous. That was just a tension, and you could feel it in the crowd even. And the thing that settled those was Niall O'Mara's goal. I mean, that just settled the whole thing down for Tip. Everybody just...
Shane, sorry to interrupt. We're just going to have to get you back in a better phone line. It's just breaking up that bit too much. We'll just give you a ring back and get you back in a better line. Try and do that now. Okay, sorry about that, Facebook viewers. We'll go back to Shane, hopefully in a slightly better line. I was asking you about that first 15, 18 minutes, Shane, and how worried you were or otherwise.
Yeah, apologies, Joe. Just we're on the train on the way down there now to Thurles to meet all the boys. But no, look, I suppose there was this nervousness, and it was kind of epitomised by Barry Heffernan trying to come out with the ball. And as I said, he had the game of his life yesterday, but he gives the hand pass straight to TJ Reid. And there was that nervousness, but then Niall O'Meara gets the goal and settles the whole thing down. And you could see that there was nervousness in that. You think about where TJ's frees were. Like, a lot of TJ's frees were right in front of the goal, so they were taking us on, and we had to nearly bring them down, you know, right in front of the goal within 45 yards for a lot of the frees that TJ scored in the first half. But look, obviously the Richie Hogan thing is it's a pity it's a talking point, but it was 1-8 to 11 points at the time. He gets his red card. But I just feel Tipper in the zone yesterday that they were going to win that game anyway. I mean, they pushed on in the second half. They scored 2-16, but 2-14 of that is from play. And, you know, just the way they worked the ball, the composure they had. The other side of it for me, Joe, was they really, really did box clever yesterday in that we don't want to go along against Kilkenny for puckouts. So what do? You know, let's try and keep possession as much as we can, especially with Cathal Barrett being the spare man in the second half. And, you know, Brian Hogan has the ball in his hand 27 times for puckouts, but he goes short 13 times, and we win 13 of those puckouts. Okay, and out of the 14 we go long, we won 7 of them. If you compare that to Kilkenny stats for puckouts yesterday, and I was just really surprised by their tactic. They went long 33 times, they only won 9 of them. And that's not Kilkenny. Like, I mean, Kilkenny did that to Kilkenny did that to Limerick, in that they forced them to go long. They won the majority of the puckouts. Yesterday, with Cathal being back there on the edge of the D, they just went long, but they weren't getting any change out of it. And it was a big surprise for me in that they didn't change the tactic. They didn't go to maybe another plan, another idea. And talking to Richie Power after the game, he said, we went back to the way that we used to play in 9, 10 and 11.
Yeah.
But then I said to Richie, well, you weren't in there, or Eddie Brennan, or Henry Shefflin, or Owen Larkin, or these guys to win the balls. You know, it's a different calibre of player.
Yes.
You know, to the testament of the old guys that you could launch ball and top it in, Joe. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they win it. Whereas yesterday they were launching ball in. Barry Heffernan, Ronan Maher, Cathal, Seamus Kennedy, Paddy, ball after ball after ball. We brought it out of the defence. Like, I'll be honest, Joe, for the last 9-10 minutes of that game yesterday, Tipperary people knew we were going to win that game. Like.
Yeah, I think most of us suspected it from about the 42nd minute, to be honest. I'm sure you were a bit more nervous.
But you're always nervous. You're always nervous when you're playing Kilkenny, like, you know.
I know. On the puck-out situation, Brendan Cummins had some stats as well in the Indo today. So after the Richie Hogan dismissal, Kilkenny just hit 2 short puck-outs for the rest of the game, and they won both of them. They went long 23 times, and they won just 5 of those 23. Now, it's hard to know cause and effect, whether the puck-out situation was a result of the pressure they were under or whether it contributed massively. But either way, it was a big factor in the game. We'll come to the second half in a second, Jamesie, and I definitely get your thoughts on the points that Shane makes. But on the sending off, just before that, between the Niall O'Meara goal and the sending off, do you share Shane's sense that Tipperary had come to grips with the game and were getting on top and were probably looking like they're more likely to win even before Hogan went?
Well, certainly, Joe, up to Niall O'Meara's goal, you couldn't say that, because Kilkenny, were winning all the breaking ball. I mean, John Donnelly was coming deep. I thought he had a really good game yesterday. Obviously, TJ was coming deep, and Tip, just before the goal, Brendan Maher, was coming out with a ball and had a chance maybe to ping Callan. Callan had made a run and really held on to it, kept going, and had almost run up a kind of blind alley and ended up flicking it over someone's head and kind of got a soft enough, cheap enough free. And I think from the puck out then, obviously O'Meara got the goal, and suddenly the game had turned on its head, and Tip, started to find their rhythm. But I mean, those puck out stats mean nothing if it's 15 on 15, because Kilkenny then push up on the short puck out, and the easy out ball to Cathal Barrett or someone else in the full back line isn't done. So obviously the sending off has a massive impact on that side of things, and certainly. In the first half, when Tip were going long, they weren't getting a whole lot of change. But O'Meara's goal certainly was the turning point in the first half, and obviously Richie's was the big turning point and the big talking point in the game itself. Yeah,
so give us your reading on the Hogan sending off then.
Well, listen, I mean, again, I think, and I said this on air yesterday, I think he probably paid the price for Killian Buckley 3 weeks ago, because Buckley, I think, caught Will O'Donoghue coming out with the kind of a high elbow, and I think Alan Kelly just issued him with a yellow card. And I'd say in the referee's review or officialdom look at that, Alan Kelly was probably pinged for not sending him off. That's a straight red, Alan, you missed it. And I'd imagine that it was probably a topic of conversation amongst the referees. So, listen, did Richie mean to put in a hard tackle, a hard shoulder? Absolutely. When Barrett stepped inside him, I think it was an instinctive thing that the elbow came up. I mean, it looks worse when you see it back. It always looks worse, I think. For me, I mean, it's sometimes said like that he's given the referee now a decision to make. So was I shocked it was a red card? I wasn't. In the circumstances, greasy conditions, the type of player Richie Hogan is, I don't think anybody in the stadium would have argued with James Owens if he'd brandished a yellow and given him a severe warning. But Joe, it's a bit like, I suppose, wanting consistency, you know, and that's I think the thing that they're looking for, and that's, I suppose, that's where the you know, this blows up, that there's inconsistency, that Killian Buckley, you know, got away with one maybe in the semi-final, and I feel that, as I said, Richie, because it was a topic, probably paid the price for that yesterday. And you know, listen, he caught him high, there's no question about it. But it was a big decision to make for James Owens, and in fairness to him, he didn't shirk it, but it was a pivotal moment in the game. Because
Brian Cody made the point afterwards that he felt you have to be sure if you're going to make that decision, and he interpreted James Owens taking time and talking to his linesman as a sign that he wasn't sure. But like, by the same token, if Owens had ran over and just brandished a red straight away, you could imagine Cody saying, well, he didn't even consult with the linesman, he didn't even take his time, he rushed into it. Like, I don't see how it's not a red. You know, greasy conditions for me don't come into it, because frankly he didn't slip. He was clearly peeved that Barrett got away with one on him. You know, he had to go off as a blood substitute, we know that, and there wasn't even a yellow brandished, and there'd been a few wides. I think Hogan had a wide as well, maybe that contributed to his frustration. Look, he went to nail him, and then Barrett stepped inside and the elbow comes up. Whether it's instinctive or not, like, you know, Richie Hogan can kind of change the angles of his wrists in a heartbeat and do it spectacularly well. He's incredibly coordinated. I hate that he got sent off, because he's such a joy of a player to watch. But like, you just can't have that in the game, I'd put it to you, Shane. You know, if that's not a red card, then I don't know what is. Where's the game going if it's not? Tony Kelly got done in a league game early on. Like, I definitely take the point on Killian Buckley, but the players have known for the whole season now that the referees are clamping down on this, and I'd say if Richie Hogan was honest with himself, as he was sprinting towards Barrett, he was not in a state of flow. He was not in a calm mental space. He was frustrated.
Unfortunately, I'm in agreement with you, Joe. A lot of the Kilkenny guys are maybe a bit peeved by it, but it was a great point made, and so the game yesterday, like, are we going with common sense or are we going with the rules? And the rules state that, you know, if your elbow is up and if it's into the head, it's a red card. Anything around the head, any interference with the helmet, it's a red card. And you said it, like Richie Hogan. I mean, talk about trying to change the wrist. This guy's a world champion baller. I mean, if anybody can do it in the flicker, it's this guy. And he went into nail call, but first and foremost, he went in to hit him shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, so when I say nail him, I mean nail him fairly.
I know what you meant, yeah. And I agree with you. He went in and hit him shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
That split second call, Barrett has fantastic footwork. He changed, but unfortunately that elbow didn't come down. And that's what it is. The elbow caught him on the chin. It's a charge to the head. You go by the rules, that is a red card. Now, you know, you can feel aggrieved, you can have a little bit of a crawl with you, Hogan. I admire him so much. I think he was a fantastic runner. We'll go down as one of the greats as well. But if it was anybody else, if it was a club or anything, your elbow goes up and catch a guy under the chin, whether you mean it or not, you're getting a red card in a final or in a challenge match under lights somewhere. It's a red card, and I think James Owens made the right decision. Does everyone agree with this? No, but sure, look, that's going to happen with every big decision. It's just unfortunate it happened in an All-Ireland final on the biggest day of the year, Joe. That's the really killing thing, like, you know.
Yeah, James, do you want to come back in on it?
No, I mean, listen, you can't. I don't disagree with anything Shane said. In terms of, you know, as I said, it looks like when you slow it down, it looks like it's you know, it's a cast iron decision, but it's consistency, Joe. It's a bit like, you know, the helmet rule. I mean, players know now, okay, if you pull the helmet off a guy in a row, whatever, that's it. It's an automatic red card, and therefore you don't see it. And that's the point, I think, about the Buckley thing, where, you know, Buckley gets away with it 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And Richie then paid the price of that, I think yesterday. But listen, I understand. I mean, and the thing about James Owens, I mean, listen, yeah, he didn't brandish the card straight away. You know, he took his time. Obviously, it was a decision he felt he had to get right. I don't know whether he's somebody else in his ear who maybe had a look at it upstairs. I'm not sure about that. But as I said, listen, he didn't shirk the hard decision, and it was a hard decision. But at the end of the day, would it have altered the results? It would have altered maybe the game and the course the game took. But I still think that, listen, Tip, we're going to find a way with the quality they had to, to win the match anyway. Certainly wouldn't have been 14 points, but I think they had that. A bit like Galway, I think, in 2017 and Limerick last year, that they weren't going to be denied. It was as simple as that. But it's just a pity, as I said, for Richie himself that he's obviously feeling as low as a snake's belly today, and in terms of how it hurt the team and so on. But it's just one of those things, and it happened. And as I said, the big thing for Tip was how they adjusted to it, because they gave a clinic on how to use a spare man after giving a clinic 3 weeks ago about how to play against an extra man, and you've got to give credit to the backroom team for that, and their use of the ball in the second half. I mean, Kilkenny at times couldn't lay a glove on them, and that's when you have Noel McGrath and these guys just with time to pick out the passing side, it's a foregone conclusion. They're just going to cut you to pieces. Yeah, and even they worked a few short poke outs to Noel McGrath, got Ronan Maher in the ball, so it was just everything that could go wrong seemed to in the second half. And again, just to emphasise, when I say Richie Hogan went to nail him, I do mean fairly. It was a shoulder to shoulder, put him out over. It was just Barrett was too quick for him, and then the elbow came up, and I'd say he feels terrible. Richie's one of those guys where Richie doesn't back down. I mean, Richie is small
spiky,
And some of the Kilkenny guys, JJ would have, said to me, going back with it about, that it's very, very hard to knock Richie. He's got that low centre of gravity, and he to earn his spurs and learn things the hard way. Under Cody and Kilkenny, particularly when he first broke into the pan and he was this prodigy and so on. So yeah, huge sympathy for Richie today. Yeah, Shane, I think you have to run. Are we going to see just a final word from you? One of the interesting questions is whether or not Tipperary are going to regain a title. It's their 28th All-Ireland. The last time they won 2 in the Bounce was 54 years ago, so there's definitely a bit of a trend there. There's a decent sample size. This team look equipped to do it, as competitive as the championship is.
Yeah, they have a group to do it. Everybody questioned the legs yesterday. I think the legs held up fine with all the boys yesterday. I think Noel McGrath gave one of the greatest midfield exhibitions ever yesterday, and he scored 120 in the championship now, and he's just an artist there in the middle of the field, what he's able to do. I think we have guys coming in now from the 20s again. Jake Morris, Marquis was on the 21s last year. Willie Connors comes on, pops over 2 pints. Ger Brown a pint from play. We have a good panel. The most important thing for this group to be successful is Liam Sheedy. Liam Sheedy, I've no doubt he's going to stay on, and the backroom team with him. Liam stays with the belief in this group. Can they do it? Yeah, of course they can do it, but we said Limerick could do it this time last year. I think whoever's winning All-Ireland now, Joe, it really, really deserves it. As I said already, you win 8 games there, or 10 years ago, you have 2 All-Ireland medals. You have got to be the best team in the country to win All-Ireland now, and you will not get away with too many slip-ups. And if they can they do it? Of course they can do it. And tonight will they say they can do it? Sure, we will. We'll say tonight they can do it. Sure, look, this time next year we could be having a completely different conversation.
Well, listen, I'll let you get off and enjoy the evening. Thanks a million for being with us. Cheers, Shane.
Cheers, Joe. Thank you.
James, we might hang on and talk about a few other bits and pieces. The second half, so Kilkenny going into break, I'd say they're shook. Like, Cody was livid in the sideline. You could see, the whole Kilkenny backroom team were disgusted with the decision. They go in at half-time. At that stage, I presume the conversation is that they're going to assume Tipperary will most likely use the extra man somewhere in defence, or maybe around midfield, but most likely in defence. And the conversation that might happen there, launching balls in on top of Kyle Barrett and then a full back line who are good in the air as well, they must at some stage in that half-time think, well, that maybe we try it once or twice, but that is not going to be the secret to success here. And even early on in the half, even for the players not to realise that this wasn't working, they just seem to keep going down that same avenue.
I think the key thing, Joe, that they needed to do after half time, and I'm sure they spoke about, was listen, keeping it tight, staying in the game, not allowing Tip to get those goals. Yeah. And just they look at everybody was obviously going to have to work harder, but Tip come out and outscored them 2-5 to 3 points, whatever it was, Joe, in the first kind of 7 or 8 minutes, and then. After that, then all bets are off. It's a completely different ball game. Forget about keeping it tight. Now we feel we need to get goals to win this. We're never going to outpoint Tip from here. But certainly, they were unbelievably one-dimensional in that second half. And when Fennelly was getting no change, and they clearly knew the goals. It was a case of stick TJ Reid in there and stick Walter Walsh in there, and let's go to Twin Towers and let's bomb ball in there. But the Kilkenny defenders, or the Tip defenders, knew. Listen, they just had to keep it out of their hands, knock it to the ground. We've got an extra body there, and it was meat and drink to Tip. And I think, to be fair to Kilkenny, I mean, everyone said after 2013 that the game had changed, and we're going to see this Clare dominance and this Cork dominance and so on. And Cody went and I think they've added, you never saw Kilkenny going short of the puck out. We've seen that they can do that. We've seen it in league matches and championship matches. I think they look back at this again and say, yeah, okay, maybe we needed to play differently. And they've had trouble against sweeper systems, and Wexford in particular. They've found Wexford, Joe, hard to play against, over the last couple of years. And that's something that I think the Kilkenny backroom team will probably spend lots of nights maybe talking over and mulling over and maybe finding different ways to counteract it. But, I mean, look at ball winners. Brendan Maher is a massive player. Pádraig Maher is a massive player, and it was, I suppose, Seamus Kennedy and Ronan Maher and obviously Barry Heffernan were immense as well, immense in the air. And they're probably one of the few teams in the country that can go toe to toe with Kilkenny in the air. But certainly, Joe, one-dimensional stuff, and they lapped it up, and really they never looked like breaking Tip down, getting the goals they were going to need to claw back. Yeah,
it's hard to explain really, isn't it? Because if that sending off had maybe happened 5-10 minutes into the second half and they didn't have a chance to regroup and talk it through, you could see how you might just fall into the trap of doing the same thing over and over again. It was almost so surprising because they had the half time to talk it through that they came out and tried to play the game this way. What do you suspect that is? Is it's some kind of panic, or words just went in one ear and out the other in the dressing room at half time? I guess we'll never quite know exactly what was said, but they couldn't have thought that was the best way to go about their business in the second half. I just can't imagine them at half time concluding that if they're talking it through.
Yeah, but it happened so quickly, Joe. I mean, even for the first goal, I think Pádraig Walsh kind of half cut out a ball that was probably destined for Paul Murphy's hand.
Yeah.
And suddenly it alters course, and John McGrath is in and gets the shot off, and then Murphy is probably a fraction of a second away from beating Callan to the ball, and it's not in the back of the net. And then Callan, Joey Holden actually, Bubbles is kind of, running in, and he'd been on, I think, Pádraig Walsh maybe just before that, and Bubbles is running in towards goal. Callan, the ball's gone out to Callan in the corner, and Joey Holden looks over his shoulder, and Paul Murphy's coming back as well, and there's another tip forward just outside him, and then as Callan kind of steps inside, Joey gets drawn to Callan, assuming that Paul Murphy, has picked Bubbles up, and suddenly Callan sees that, well, there's no marking Bubbles, and he slips it to Bubbles when 99 out of 100 forwards would have popped it over the bar, and from there it's in the back of the net, and then Joe, it's game over. You
think they just felt they were chasing goals then?
Well, I think that it happened so quickly that the plan maybe went out the window, because, as I said, Tip just hit them with 2-5 in the space of 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then, it's easy to say, well, we should have ran the ball, but I mean, you do what you do, and teams that run the ball all year long. They run it in the league. They're used to playing that way. They train that way all the time. Kilkenny have got where they've got by being Kilkenny, by doing what they do well, and maybe adapting and adjusting to it. I think as well, Joe, I mean, Adrian Mullen was clearly out of sorts.
Yeah.
He wasn't the Adrian Mullen we've seen all year. Walter Walsh didn't look again like the Walter Walsh of previous years. He's had an injury interrupted season. Richie obviously has been injury ravaged. And I wonder as well, how much did the Limerick game, in terms of the mental energy they expended and what it took to get up for that game, and what they gave Joe to win that game. I mean, it was kamikaze stuff, the commitment and the physicality that they brought. And there's only so many times, I think, regardless of how good you are, you could deliver like that. And it's particularly hard to put it to do it back to back. And they certainly didn't look to the same energy levels in the second half that Tip did. And maybe there's some spillover from the semi-final in their performance.
Yeah. What do you think is next for both teams next year then?
Well, listen, Kilkenny, I mean, when Cody sits down, I mean, I suppose, listen, Adrian Mullen came through this year, Conor Brown came through this year. I don't think there'll be any retirements. I mean, TJ is probably maybe 31, 32. Richie is the same. Colin Fennelly, I think, is 2 years younger. Walter Walsh is probably closing that 30 mark. But I don't think you'll see any retirements. I mean, James Maher, again, wasn't able to play a full part this year. Buckley was in and out of the team, had a knee injury, couldn't seem to get right and get game time. So, listen, Joe, they're not that far off. I mean, they were in the All-Ireland final. They were one of the two teams that could have won it.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt.
And Cody always seems to have that ability.
A lot of people say
Cody always seems to have that ability to find one or two players as well.
Yeah.
Maybe over the winter.
A lot of people did say of Kilkenny that they expected them to be a real force next year. That was one of the things people were saying across the year, even here on Analysis. And so there's nothing to say that shouldn't be the case. I guess it's such a devastating loss, and it's probably a big blow for Cody as well. You wonder, can it knock things off slightly? But then, look, he has such a track record of coming back regardless of what, and getting the team in shape regardless of what, that you presume those predictions earlier this year that Kilkenny will be a big force next year should absolutely come to fruition. Like, they're too mentally tough to let a horrible day like this affect them for an overly long period. Yeah,
and listen, they'll lick their wounds over the winter and they'll be back. But they're back in a very, very competitive province. I mean, Galway, will have to be, stung by the way their year panned out. Wexford will feel. I mean, Wexford must be sick, Joe, given, how close obviously they ran Tip, and you wonder, will they get a better chance to get back there again? So, but Kilkenny or Kilkenny. I mean, Cody. I think it's a foregone conclusion. Cody and the management team will be back, but they've probably got to find a couple of players up front. They've probably got to. Got to look at maybe the way they're playing their own sweeper systems, and maybe look at their style of play. But as I said, Joe, it served them well. And, I don't think Cody's beliefs in terms of what it takes to win All-Ireland would have changed too much. And the reality is they were beaten by a team yesterday. They played very, very well. They have a lot of flair, a lot of class players, and some of the greatest players that ever played the game. And listen, there's no shame in that.
Yeah, and then a final word on Tip. So Sheedy is staying. I presume he'll do everything he can to convince Eamon O'Shea that he absolutely has to stay. And that backroom team, as we mentioned, is massive and running very effectively under Sheedy's leadership. And then the average age of the team is 27. 2 or 3 games ago, people were saying they didn't have the squad, and now the bench is making impacts in big games. So everything points to Tip being in really good shape next year. The 2 caveats being, 1, how competitive the championship is, and 2, their track record of not following these things up. I guess Sheedy would give you hope if you're a Tip fan. That's the difference.
Yeah, well, and listen, a lot of those players, know maybe the mistakes that were made in 2011 and 2017. So there'll be huge motivation, to do it back to back. But as Shane said, we said the same thing about Limerick, and after the Munster final, I mean, everyone assumed that Limerick were favourites to win it, and that they'd beat Kilkenny in the semi-final and probably square off against Tip again in the final. But the big positive from a Tipperary perspective is that the guys that came off the bench, the younger players, got a taste of it, Joe, in the semi-final, and they got a taste of the big time yesterday. And when you get a taste of it, it's like a drug, you want more of it. And the big thing, I think, for Kilkenny, and why Kilkenny were able to keep doing it, was the competition for places. And the fact that Cody just had this permanent state of disequilibrium where, regardless of who you were, if you weren't doing it in Nolan Park on a Tuesday or Thursday night, you weren't playing, simple as. Yeah. And that's what drove those guys on. And Sheedy looks like he's probably closer to having a panel that has the depth, where there is that genuine competition for places. And all those guys will be a year older and a year stronger and probably hungrier to break into that team. And that obviously puts them in a good spot.
Yeah, I suspect it does. Jamesie, thanks so much for hanging on. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Joe.